In this episode, we're going to be looking at boost control problems and what you can do about them. As a quick overview on a general boost control system, we're looking at the wastegate here. This is an internal wastegate with the actuator referenced to boost pressure. So basically, the more boost pressure you have, the further the wastegate flap will open. So that is how the system self-regulates. Now, of course, you will put a boost controller in here, whether that be the factory boost control solenoid or whether it's an aftermarket bleed valve or electronic boost control system. They usually go into this line here to regulate the pressure going to the wastegate actuator. So the common boost control issues we're looking at, we can see here, I've got a graph here of boost up this way, RPM along here. So the first one is boost spiking. So you'll see the boost rises really quickly, it overshoots your target pressure and then settles down to your target boost. Second one is boost taper. So your boost increases, it hits the target, it stabilizes for a bit and then it starts to fall away as RPM increases. Third one is boost creep. So you have boost rises, it stabilizes at your target boost pressure, and then when you get to a certain point in the RPM range, it will just start to increase uncontrollably. Boost instability. This is a condition where the boost will rise and you'll hit target boost, but then it may start to oscillate and you can actually hear it as kind of a fluttering, surging kind of sound. The last one not shown here is boost variations, where on one occasion you might hit target boost, the next time you might come in under target, might go over target. You're never quite sure whether it's going to hit target boost or not. We'll start with boost spiking. This one's probably one of the most common boost control issues, and it's caused by trying to bring the boost on too hard, too soon, at too low an RPM. So what can happen is the boost controller is effectively trying to hold back the pressure from the wastegate actuator. Now that means the wastegate will stay shut longer. So the turbo is building boost, and then the boost controller, whether it be a bleed valve with a ball and spring or an electronic controller, once you reach a certain boost level, it will then allow pressure to the actuator, which will then open and start regulating the boost pressure. There is a system delay in this whole thing working. So the pressure has to get into the actuator, it has to move the arm, which then has to change the compressor speed. So all of that takes a certain amount of time, and if you leave it too late, that's when the boost can actually overshoot. Now sometimes manufacturers will actually build in a little bit of a boost spike as a feature of the boost curve. It makes the car feel kind of urgent when it comes on peak boost, so you get there really quickly and then it will tame down a little bit. Unfortunately, it can make the car kind of feel like you're really going to start to go and then it's what can you do to fix it? So if it's a factory boost controller that is causing this boost spike, chances are it's actually been designed to do it that way specifically. And if you want to change that behaviour, really the only way to do it is to retune the ECU or fit an aftermarket boost controller. If it's your aftermarket boost controller that's causing the boost spike, there is usually a setting on there which controls how hard the boost comes on, and most manufacturers will call that setting the gain. So all it would be a matter of doing is just turning down the gain feature, which will allow the pressure into the wastegate actuator a little bit earlier, and that's going to stop your boost spiking. Now the next one we're going to look at is boost taper. This is also fairly common and it's usually a function of the size of the turbocharger itself. Now most factory turbochargers are specifically matched to the engine to give the peak boost at the most usable RPM range. So there's no point fitting a factory turbo to a car that people are going to drive that only makes boost from 5,000 RPM. So typically a stock turbo will usually make boost between say 2 to 4 or 5,000 RPM, and then beyond that it just starts to become a choke point, and the boost as a result will start to fall away as you approach redline. Now this may be costing you a little bit of power up top. If you're able to bring the boost curve up and keep it flatter towards redline, you can keep the power climbing as you get higher in the RPM range. Most electronic boost controllers will have a closed loop function that will allow you to increase the duty cycle, which will try to hold the boost as high as it can. Now the problem is if you bump that setting up as high as you can but you still can't keep that boost curve flat, it's basically an indication that your turbo is just too small. So in those cases where the factory turbocharger is just not large enough to supply the amount of boost that you want all the way to redline, really all you can do about that is to let the boost taper away naturally so you don't overstress all the components, or fit a bigger turbo. Okay, so the next one to look at is boost creep. This one is slightly less common because it comes about from a turbo engine wastegate size mismatching. What you'll find is that when it occurs, there'll be a certain point in the RPM range at which the boost just starts to climb, and no matter what you do with the boost controller, you can't bring it down. So really all that is telling you is that the wastegate is just too small and it cannot flow enough exhaust gas. So the only solution for that condition is to fit a bigger wastegate, or if it's an internal gate, to port it out so that the hole is larger and can flow a bigger amount of gas. Now moving on to boost instability. Now this is something that you would not usually see with a manual bleed valve or a factory boost control system, but if you are running an aftermarket electronic boost controller that runs closed loop correction, sometimes this can occur because of the system delay in the turbo. So what will happen is it tries to bring boost on hard, it overshoots a tiny bit, then it may correct the wastegate duty cycle down a little bit, boost will drop, then it'll go back up. So the system can actually go unstable. So each time it corrects, it actually overcorrects. So it gets bigger, smaller, and eventually the whole boost curve is starting to ripple. And you can actually feel that as you come on boost, the car starts to jerk. So if you're seeing boost instability and the boost is being controlled by the factory ECU, really the only solution to fix that problem is to get the ECU retuned. But on the other hand, if the boost instability is being caused by an aftermarket boost controller, the chances are it's just because of the closed loop control being a bit too aggressive. So all you would need to do in that case is to go into the menu and just turn that setting down a little bit so it's not quite so strong in the way that it corrects for boost changes. Now the last one that I mentioned before in the intro, boost variations. Now there's a lot of factors that affect the boost pressure in your car, and it's not as simple as saying, well, the boost controller should make it happen. The problem is you've got things like atmospheric conditions, so pressure. As you go up in altitude, the available air for the turbo to compress, it gets thinner, so it's harder for the turbo to actually make boost. Likewise, on a hot day when the air is less dense, it also means that the turbo is not able to make as much boost as it could, say, on a cold night. So you will find that the driving conditions or the atmospheric conditions when you're driving your car can actually change how much boost your turbo will like to make. The good thing is it's not really a bad condition, because let's say you're driving on a cold night and your car is making 1 or 2 psi more than usual. That's not such a bad thing, because at least the air is colder, your intercooler will be working better, and there's less chance of detonation. So in that case, it's probably not all that much to worry about. So there you have it. These are the common boost control issues that you're likely to come across. The important thing to note is it's not always a problem with your boost controller. A lot of these symptoms are caused by the turbo system itself. So you've got to take a look at the engine, the turbo, the wastegate and the controller as a whole complete system, so you can figure out exactly what is going on and what you can do about it.